The movie 2001: A Space Odyssey draws a very clean line between the invention or discovery of tools, a bone to bash the skull of their enemies, straight to a species that's right on the verge of becoming interplanetary. Now, this is not necessarily going to be a review or critique of Denis Villeneuve's Dune, because I'm such a huge Dune fan that any amount of hype or heat that comes to Dune is good for the whole, and hopefully it encourages people to read the books. And the movies are definitely entertaining and definitely good and do a lot of things right. But one major flaw that I saw, at least in the first Dune film, in a book that has so much exposition and so much history, they didn't include at least one title card in the opening of the film to just set the stage and let people know an important point. After all, in Denis Villeneuve's history, we see the movie Sicario opens with a title card to explain what that is and what the setting of the story is, to set the mood, so to speak. And I don't know why there couldn't have been just a simple little reference to say, in this universe, although man has reached the stars and populated the galaxy, they have rebelled against machines, and particularly thinking machines, any kind of machine that can replicate the mind of man. That, to me, is what makes Dune so unique, and why it is, if I may say, so important now more than ever. Basically because we're on the verge of what would be the thinking machine revolution. Everything since the invention of the microchip has become an obsession with computational technology, and we're sort of cresting out of the online bubble or the online wave and moving into AI and decentralized financing and authentication and those sort of things. So it's hard to imagine a world that doesn't take place with any of those functions. Dune is a profoundly human-centered sci-fi. It's really a sci-fi about human capability. The characters that we encounter are so strange to us because humanity has limited its exploration of external technology, and every bit of the human instinct to evolve and to tinker and to grow and to progress was turned towards the actual human vehicle itself, so that the people who occupy the Dune universe are basically aliens. It's really a story, especially as you continue in the series, a story of how alien humans can become to themselves, not necessarily because they've merged with some kind of technology, which that is another way of looking at sci-fi, of like, how human can we be when we take on computer chips and machinery into our bodies. And I think that it's not talked about enough, but one of the classic space operas, Star Wars, which takes a lot from Dune, which should be obvious from the fact that they start on a desert planet with many orbiting bodies. You know, it's not a coincidence. Star Wars takes a lot from Dune, and one of the things that it takes, at least in my opinion, is not often hit upon main thrust of the movie, the first movie especially, and we see it throughout the rest, but especially in that first movie, the crux of the story is human judgment versus machine judgment. And the character of Darth Vader is someone who has turned over his judgment to the machine. As Obi-Wan says,
he's more machine now than man.
meaning that he has turned over his judgment, his facilities and faculties of being human. Darth Vader calls into question the very nature of what it means to be human because of the amount of machine parts that he's incorporated into his body.
Twisted and evil.
How many functions can we turn over to thinking machines before we cease to be human? And because companies like Google have mapped the entire planet and, can tell you how to get from one side of the world to the next and what roads to take with relatively incredible accuracy, that might have taken away for some people the ability to navigate the world without those tools. So we've offloaded our navigation abilities to an app that just tells us turn by turn by turn, and we don't even have to have a full view of the total destination. I mean, that to me, for as relatively silly as that sounds, and I admit that it is silly because I'm in no way advocating for the ceasing of any kind of wayfinding apps. I use them constantly and they give updates on traffic. I think they're all perfectly well and good. I think that what I'm getting at is we are about to enter an age where the thinking will be offloaded even more. And even more in our day-to-day lives, we will be put into a position where we're only given the next turn and the next turn. And I think certainly on a political landscape, a geopolitical landscape, when you look at works like Manufacturing Consent, I mean, I think that does present us with a kind of turn-by-turn experience of the world. And you can kind of already see that already in the way that politics unfold. It's like one big issue after another big issue after another big issue, left turn, right turn, straight, stop. When you're reduced to taking things turn by turn, it can be it can obscure the total route that you might be taking. And of course, as the sort of meme or laughable idea goes, you could accidentally take a turn that doesn't exist, but exists only in the mind of the computer, so to speak.
This is the machine knows! Stop yelling at me! No, stop yelling! There's no road here!
And that's a relatively minor, almost trivial example of day-to-day life that's affected by thinking machines. But we're about to see clearly a whole new wave of what thinking machines can do and are capable of. I mean, let's be honest. There's really no significant or meaningful laws in place right now that dictate or determine the actions of what robots and robotics can do. I mean, we're not even at a place where we can accurately define those things, much less govern them for a coming age. So it will be guaranteed, like we already see with VR and augmented reality, that these technologies will spring up without any kind of legislation to prohibit or mitigate or even discuss what their uses will be. It will be a constant lagging behind of, profit, and then kind of trying to legislate backwards from what's happened initially. From the damage will be already done to a generation. And we've seen that now, with social media, right? Like the damage is already done. Whatever social media and that technology has done to humanity, that's already well established. That's already baked in. We're already there. The train is already well down the tracks. The anxiety of modern times is more of an anxiety of being disconnected from one's own internal compass, from being disconnected from one's own internal judgment, and the judgment of the larger societal superstructure becomes the de facto default judgment mechanism for most individuals, which is convenient for efficiencies. It is convenient for sort of living our own private lives, whereas in the opposite, where let's say that these thinking machines were limited and we didn't have these computers to govern us and to manage us, the burden of interacting with people would be much heavier, because we would be constantly having to reference our own internal structures and read them and build stories and keep track of them. And it would be a tremendous cognitive load. And in a lot of ways, when people can be informed through communication technology and receive the trends of the day, receive the narrative of the day, you know, if we can all latch on to a common narrative, which I'm, at least for purposes of this video, labeling as the myth of progress, you know, or maybe the illusion of progress is a bit better. If we can all latch on to that, then we're sort of freed from the cognitive load of having to decide things for ourselves and to sort through individuals and you know, and to know whether or not they are members of a tribe, for lack of a better word, considering that we are all tribal. And in fact, Dune is a book about man's return to tribalism. And that's one thing that the film does get right, in the sense that the society is very segregated and between haves and have-nots, and it's really just the royalty who enjoy even space travel is regulated to royalty alone, and not many people travel to other planets except for the royal houses, and not many people live the way that the royals do. It's very much like the medieval times, where you have the peasantry and then you have the royalty. Unlike today's society and the narrative that we seem to be running on, which is sort of like, you too will go to Mars. You know, that's the sort of middle class ideal that we're sort of awakening from, in some sense. Is like, you too will be uploaded into the mainframe. You too will be part of the virtual experience. You too will have your life, your 15 minutes, so to speak. You too will have your life on view like a reality show. You too will experience the latest trends, and so on and so forth. But let's be realistic here. When we think about coming technologies like AI and robotics, particularly, there's the myth of progress would say that we're headed into a time when robots will just do all the heavy lifting, and we'll be free to become painters, and we'll be free to become poets and lovers, and we'll play sports, and we'll live the good life, while all of the toil will be done by robots. But let me ask you this question: is it more efficient to build millions of robots to take our place in the doing of horrible jobs, or is it more efficient to build just a few thousand very capable robots to force us all to keep doing those jobs? Those difficult jobs, which would be easier if you were designing a society, which would be less work for you if you were in charge, creating a bunch of robots to just help people, or creating a bunch of robots to oppress people? I think the answer, at least in my mind, is pretty obvious, and I would wager that that's the plan. That robots are more to keep us in line than they are to serve us. That surprise, we may end up serving the machine far more than the machine will serve us. Of course, it'll be sold as a service to you. We can already see that the rollout of policing machines is already happening. So there's no doubt in my mind that is, at least from where I'm sitting, that's the plan. Because again, it's just a matter of efficiency, right? If you have the dirty jobs that need to be done for basically no pay, the standard of living that you experience can continue to go down, lower and lower. And should you revolt, well, robots will always do what they're told and they will put you down. Whereas if you had humans in charge of enforcement, there is a certain level, supposedly, we don't know, and I don't know, but the gamble would be that the level of societal breakdown could become so bad that even human law enforcement would not fight back. You know what I mean? Because once the enforcement arm of society joins the protest arm of society, it's game over. It's game over. So what I'm saying about a myth of progress is this idea that in some ways the future is going to be meant for you and not just for some very elite class of people, which, can we face it already? That's kind of what we're seeing. For the first time in decades, the life expectancy is going down while the retirement age is going up, which should be more evidence to the point.
Because you guys paid for all of this. So seriously, for every Amazon customer out there and every Amazon employee, thank you from the bottom of my heart very much. It's very appreciated.
Once men turned their thinking over to machines in the hope that this would set them free. This is one of the characters speaking, and this is Frank Herbert's quote. And he says, "Once men turned their thinking over to machines in the hope that this would set them free, but that only permitted other men with machines to enslave them." Humanity reached a point where they said, enough is enough. And it wasn't just humanity at large, it was humanity at the bottom. And what I'm saying is the likelihood of humanity going forward into the age of AI and robotics, while at the same time retaining their access universally, like the movie Metropolis does a good example of illustrating that. Like, man becomes chained to the machine while only a few people of the total population enjoy a splendid lifestyle, Garden of Eden style, pleasure lifestyle, the most upper of upper class. And the only reason that I bring up that class distinction is to say that if we are going into a robotic age on a planet of several billion people, what would you do as a ruler, as a king, as a politician, as a billionaire, as a business leader, if you knew that the coming wave of automation and thinking machines and robotics was going to essentially evaporate millions, if not billions, of jobs, of roles, of purposes in people's lives overnight? I think what I'm trying to say is, would you then turn over that liberated population from having to work and then just say, well, here, enjoy the surplus while the robots do the work for you, and your quality of life can only improve? Or would you just make a bunch of robots that are extremely good at keeping people in line, i.e. enforcement and punishment and violence, and suppress people wanting to rebel against the conditions that they find themselves in, and force them to continue to work under worse and worse conditions? And that is the kind of scenario that the Dune universe presents. It sort of did the deal with the devil, so to speak, of allowing robots to do jobs for us and faster than light travel to take us to the stars and to calculate those pathways through the stars. But the cost was essentially enslaving humanity. And that mirrors exactly the wealth distribution that we have now in society, where it's only the 10% of wealth holders who own a 90% of all the wealth in the world, and of course in each country. So because wealth is equivalent to access to technology, it is really not far-fetched to think that only 10% of individuals or institutions, governmental bodies or corporations will have the ownership over the thinking machines. And those, even if you are, through the so-called democratization of technology, are given the opportunity to use these robots or these AIs, they will be on loan to you. So ultimately, then you can see how you're already being put into a position of subservience to a corporation or individual because these things are on loan to you. And that is the model, definitely the model moving forward with so many things, is that everything that you will so-called have access to or possession of will be on loan to you, conditionally given to you. And those conditions can become more harsh and more harsh over time, so insofar as they do not cause revolt. And in a lot of ways, society is built on the edge of revolution. And it's sort of like incremental change that gradually deteriorates the state of health and wellness of a population, so that no shift is too extreme to cause revolution. And one real nightmare scenario that we could be facing is the birth of these autonomous robots that, just like the production of plastics and the production of chemical fertilizers and antibiotics and all these sort of things that have made the abundance of resources and food possible, is also toxifying the environment. And there could come a critical point where the toxification process towards abundance outpaces medicine's ability to heal the effects of that toxification process. And likewise, we could be heading towards a focal point where robotics, autonomous robots, are being set up to enforce greater losses in living standards, in quality of life, so that you have a graph of quality of life on the decrease, and then if quality of life goes down too much, then the danger of revolution happens, the danger of overturning, the danger of revolt happens. But if you have robotics that can intercept that, so the rise of robotics has to be done. If it's done too fast, we might revolt against that. So it has to. So there's this balance of, and these graph balance of the progress of the introduction of autonomous thinking robots that enforce rules and punish people has to be set with a delicate balance of the loss of quality of life, so that they intersect at a point to which the transition can become successful. The myth is that humanity's utopic vision is right around the corner. That's, for me, the myth of progress is a maze. And how do you know when you're in a maze? Well, you know you're in a maze when the cheese that you're trying to get seems like it could just be the next corner. Like, if you just round the corner, you're going to find the cheese that you're looking for. Like the possibility of finding the prize or the exit or the center of the maze is around every corner. So you don't have the ability to judge adequately the value of each turn because you're in a maze, because essentially you're lost and you don't know the way. And that's kind of what I was bringing up about the sort of, maps, digital maps, connected maps idea, Google Maps idea of our reality, where we're fed the progress of our evolution turn by turn. And just like entering in the destination that you want in Google Maps, and you say, I'd like to go to a future where we don't need to work. I would like to go to a future where I can spend my days in leisure in the Garden of Eden. I'm setting Google Maps to Garden of Eden, and society then says, okay, we've got you. That's where we're going. We all agree that's our destination. You don't need to look at the full scope of your journey. You don't even have to understand the territory that you're going through. Like, you don't have to understand the city you're in. I could go to some city right now. I could go to San Francisco. I could go to Chicago. I could go to New York City. I could go to London. I could go to France and Paris, France. I could go to all these cities, and I could get out my phone and I could type in my location and my destination, and it would do the work for me. And I don't have to know anything at all about where I am other than how to turn left and turn right. So it kind of gives the illusion of knowing where you are without knowing anything at all where you are, and just sort of, I don't want to say blindly trusting, but essentially blindly trusting that the application is going to bring you to your desired destination, which, again, this is not to say that Google Maps is bad. I'm fine with it. It's more to say that style, that approach can be seen in the sort of further evolution of each technology that comes out, both digital, both physical, both mental, and et cetera, et cetera. So what I want to indicate again is that, progress being a straight line is a kind of myth, that if you just run if you run dimension T out to infinity, we're going to end up on the Starship Enterprise, basically with our only task being to locate underdeveloped civilizations and help bring them up into the level that we are, where all of our food is materialized for us and we want for basically nothing, and we work because we desire to work, and the challenges we take are for the challenge themselves, which is a very ideal, amazing world. And there's definitely some of that stuff at play in our day-to-day lives. And I too wish to occupy in that space where the challenge itself is taken on simply for the sake of the challenge. It's some of the best things to do. I and many of the people watching have attained a state that those peoples huddled around that singular fire, saving the berries and nuts they collected, and, going hungry for a night, being wet and cold. The dream of those peoples today has been achieved. And so humanity's progress technologically has been a series of yes, 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 yes. We've been saying yes for thousands and thousands of years and generation, even the generations before us. It's like, yes. Can we make it faster? Yes. Can we make it bigger? Yes. Can we make it warmer? Yes. Can we make it this? Yes, yes, yes. And suddenly now, the point that we are in as a species, as a society, as a human race, we are at the point now where we are finally having to say no. Where every step beyond this point, we've crossed a line now. At least that's what I'm putting forth, is that we've crossed a line now where we have to say no more. We have to say we can, but we won't. And of course, there's a bunch of arguments of like, well, you can't stop people. Someone's going to do it. I understand. But the people of Dune are living in the consequences of never having said no until it got way too bad. And then what ended up happening is they got sent back to the Middle Ages, even while they retained all of the space travel and all the anti-gravity and all these other key metrics and key components that we value. Even though they kept all that stuff societally, in terms of our cultural evolution, in terms of our cultural progress, they sent us back millions of years in this quote-unquote future scenario. One thing that the movie is missing, that the book really drives home, is that the conditions of the universe are not, as we might expect, just the natural evolution of things. They are a very controlled and very laid out and very systematic cutting of society into a frame, a stagnating of society. Its intent was to get humanity to stop progressing. But as we see, and that's one of the things that makes Dune to me such an interesting story, is that progress does not stop simply because technological processes stop, simply because technological evolution stops. It doesn't mean that human beings stop in their own evolution and their own ingenuity. And what ends up happening is that because people are no longer able to use the democratization of technology to invent a better wheel, right, so to speak, which is kind of the idea, a better mousetrap, a better wheel or whatever, to make these incremental improvements to life, because that has been capped. Human beings turn their ingenuity onto themselves, and they start to train themselves, they start to develop themselves, they start to school themselves, they start to cloister themselves, they start to take a tremendous amount of drugs, which is another topic that's really important, because that is one piece of technology that we don't often think about. Drugs are technology. They are definitely 100% technology. And if you think about it, some of the biggest companies in the world are in fact drug companies, because that is a technology. And what do they have? They have patents on those drugs. That's what drives their profits. And so within this story, I mean, the one of the central pillars of the Dune story is that the entire universe, at least in terms of the elites, are addicted to drugs. And the main character, Paul, messes with their dealership. You know, the whole story of Arrakis and spice is all because everyone is hooked on a very powerful drug. And the story of Dune, the first two books, is a story to control the drug trade. And it's something that every single person in the universe, every single royal or elite person in the universe is taking. And I mean, it's hard not to draw instantaneous parallels to something like Neuralink or something like installing computers into our minds. Once you have taken the spice, you can't stop. That's one of the crucial parts of the Dune universe. And I don't necessarily think that was included just for a plot point. I think one of the main reasons why you have to keep taking the spice is because once you start to expand your mind, which is spice does, which it expands your mind, it changes and develops you mentally and physically as well, you can't go back. And I think as a metaphor, it's really powerful in the sense that as we, the spice in a lot of ways is the fruit of knowledge. And once you taste of that fruit, you have that taste forever.
Maybe I will partake of the fruit.
Yeah.
Dude, don't eat that!
That is the crux of it, right? And so as humanity, let's take United States, for example, as the United States has gotten a taste for what you might call the good life or the democratization of technology, or, full store shelves full of fruits and vegetables and bread and abundance, surplus, as we've gotten used to what is essentially the surplus economy, we are not going to give that up so easily. And as we expect the surplus to continue through the advent of machines that can do our job, as we already see, it's leading to a destruction of the economy. And as that economy collapses, as the quality of life collapses, it's so easily found that the thing that we thought would be our savior will be our oppressor. That the thinking machines could in fact be the devices used by a small percentage of elite people to keep everyone in line. The progress of technology is fueled by exploiting people. I mean, we all know about Apple's Foxconn factories and, the exploitation of those workers. But every Apple release that comes out, we say, wow, what progress, and technology is moving forward. I know I'm being quite cynical, but it's hard not to be cynical when the promise of our future is these glasses that make it so that you can't see the reality that's right in front of you, right? Maybe, and like it's augmented reality, but maybe the whole point is to basically make a reality that you don't see, right? To actually obscure yourself, to actually obscure your regular vision from what is. They're blind. You're looking at someone like they're blinded by this. And to the user, it's like, I can see. I can't see reality, but I can see what Apple wants me to see. And we all know, of course, that all of the metals and things and lithium and cobalt and platinum and copper, et cetera, all these conflict minerals that are being used to make these electronic devices, to make these robots and the AI, is coming from people who are severely oppressed. I mean, it should be no secret, and I don't think it is any secret. And not to mention that, I mean, all of that is being fueled, of course, by machines that run off of oil and gas. So if you're benefiting from progress, then it feels like it's all justified and worthwhile. But if you're being rolled over by progress, then it feels cruel. But how many movements have claimed throughout history that this is for the benefit of everyone, and they have literally steamrolled thousands, if not millions, of people in their endeavors to make a more perfect society. Understanding ourselves is at the heart of our future. As I said, if you are simply trying to survive, if your only goal is to procreate, build a shelter, and make it to the next day, you're not able to philosophize as much as you would be inside of society. But when you build that society, which allows you to philosophize, as I am doing now, and wax poetic and make all these external things because you're not worried about where the next meal will come from and the next meal and the next meal, it begins to put a very strange burden on the human condition where we are forced to reckon with ourselves. We are forced to understand ourselves. Like the only way out, is not the stars. The only way out is in, where we have to truly come to grips with who we are, because that's going to determine our progress forward. Once you've already established that your wants, needs, and desires are basically met, coming from the scenario I just gave of trying to make ends meet and, day-to-day grinding every single minute, you're not able to question what it means to be human. But that's also not a coincidence when you think about the fact that these thinking machines are going to severely make us think. They're really going to force us to think about what it means to be human. But at the same time, we are met with a day-to-day grind that is ever more grinding and ever more oppressive, and our take on society is ever more fearful and ever more, catastrophe is looming on every horizon. So it seems, world war or ecological disaster looming, and that pressure of it is condensing or shrinking or narrowing our worldview, so that we think less and less and less about what it means to be human and more about what it means to just simply survive, or simply consume and make it to the next day, or distract ourselves. Good timing. Or distract ourselves. But that very distraction is needed to facilitate the introduction of these new technologies, which ultimately will be used to oppress us. I mean, there's no reason to think that it won't. If no source of power ever distributes means to its people that will give them the power to overthrow themselves, there's no power which will ever give us or the people it's ruling the power to overthrow it. So whatever we have access to can't be a threat to the system, because the system would never allow anything to exist that would be a threat to itself. When I say we have to start saying no to things, I don't want to make that be a negative. It could be a positive in the sense that we start to put our efforts towards only quality of life, that perhaps making our trains and planes 10% faster, or even our computation 10% faster, even 4G, 5G, 6G, 7G. Maybe this myth of progress is really just another way to trick us into giving up our humanity. You look at retirement across the board, and the desire in Western countries to increase the retirement age, and it's like, so you work all your whole life for something called retirement, but in the process of working towards it, you're not even offered it. It's something, like I said, like this maze example. Progress is like a maze in the sense of, like, at least on a social level, it's been given to us like, this is the next best thing, this is the next best thing, this is the next best thing. We tend to get swept up in the early phases of a technology, but we have to ask ourselves questions like, what if humanity cannot leave the planet? Is that a possibility? I know that a lot of people will reject it and say, no, we're destined for the stars. What if we're not? What if our computers can't get much faster? No, that's impossible. We're always making progress, like the exponential curve. But what if there's not? What if there's a cliff? What if there's a plateau? What if the amount of energy we have to put into improving these external sources of technology just doesn't yield results? And I think that's what I'm saying here. We're starting to see how at the same time we are definitely on the verge of a crucial step where we're transitioning into something that, for as far as we know, has never existed on the planet. And I'm not saying that AI is conscious. I'm not saying that we're about to birth a new species of thinking machines, but we are about to produce machines that we will surrender our autonomy and decision making to. But boom and bust, everybody thought NFTs were the biggest thing. Everybody thought tulips were the biggest thing. And then, wouldn't you know it, we won't get fooled again, but we always seem to get fooled again. The hype, as the psychology as technology is already being used on us. And the problem with when you externalize it, like with the Apple Vision, the problem is when you make it a thing, when you make technology specifically only in the realm of machinery, you may make the crucial mistake of not understanding that the first step is psychology. Like the old adage says, if you asked a farmer during the ages of horse and carriage, what would you like as a farmer, to make your life better, they would say a bigger horse. They would never say a tractor. Well, what you had to do was psychologically prepare people for the advent of the tractor. And again, I wouldn't want to go back to horses. I wouldn't want to take away the tractor. I would like the tractor to exist and increase in its efficiency and its ability to produce food. This is not an advocacy for going backwards or going back to a simpler time. It's really more of a statement that the universe that Dune offers us is that we are headed backwards whether we like it or not. That's the scary thing about what Dune says, is that we're going backwards, especially when we think we're going forwards. That the idea that feudalism is in our past and being ruled by kings and queens is in our past, it's like, no, that is our ever-present thing. And that all we are experiencing inside of society is always just an experiment. And the fundamental properties of what it means to be human will always be the driving factor of our endeavors. The artificial intelligence known as HAL in 2001 plays a very large role in the progression of the film. In fact, it could be called the antagonist of the film, serving as a warning to thinking machines. But this wouldn't be right. You see, it's no coincidence, of course, that HAL's shape is the same as the monolith that inspires man to reach for the stars, a sort of divine intervention or inspiration, or man's reaching for the transcendental, man's inventiveness, if you will. HAL is presented as the enemy, but like today, considering AI to be an enemy would just be spinning our wheels and missing the target completely. Because HAL didn't malfunction in the film, and HAL didn't choose to become evil. He was simply following orders. In fact, HAL was performing his duties perfectly. The artificial intelligence was given a prime directive. It was told that the mission was more important than any of the crew. So when the crew became a threat to the mission, HAL decided to dispose of them. Frank Herbert is warning us that it's not the machines that are the issue, it's the people who control the machines. When we look at a book like Dune and its relevance today, we see that their society, while yes, being a medieval structure, didn't get that way because of the collapse of machine technology and thinking machines. It was already there. The removal of the thinking machines only revealed the natural order of human organization. Frank Herbert is stating that humans' natural inclination is to form hierarchies, is to turn over their power to authority figures, is to turn over their authority to a higher power. And what he's advocating throughout all of his books is that the power return to the people and not trust every messiah, every tech lord, every duke, every king, every emperor, and certainly every machine. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe and comment below. What do you think of the new Dune movie? And what do you think of Dune's relevance to our world today?